we're going to take another focus now. A 2020 Pew Research Center survey has pointed to America's reputation declining over the past year among many key allies and partners. So part of that really has been how Donald Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, in several countries, the share of public with a favorable view of the U.S. is as low as it has been at any point since this research center began polling on this topic nearly 2 decades ago. A clear line of decline has been seen since Donald Trump took office as president, with the image of the United States suffering across many regions of the globe. And to talk to us a little bit about the challenges of repairing that image, I'm now joined by two former diplomats who've both served their countries in Africa and the United States. And we say good evening to Ambassador Welile Nhlapo and Ambassador Charles Stith. To both of you gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Peter.
All right, let me start with you, Ambassador Nhlapo. You served as South African ambassador to the United States, so you know what it's like dealing with the United States directly and some of the workings of the U.S. And I just wonder, at that time, I think George Bush was president at the time, what were some of the, I'll use the word challenges, but perhaps it's not the right one, in terms of dealing with this nation called America, especially as it looks outwards?
Thank you. By the time I arrived at the U.S., George Bush was about to leave.
Ah, right.
Okay. But I think there was 3 months before that. There are quite a number of issues in terms of our relations that we had to deal with. There was an arrangement between President Thabo Mbeki, President George Bush, and Prime Minister Blair that they should not create too many problems and obstacles in the process that he was managing in Zimbabwe then. And they had agreed not to do that. But when Prime Minister Blair was about to leave, he changed his tune. President Bush started doing the same. So part of what we were then dealing with at that time was precisely that problem as to why. What were the reasons? Because there was an agreement, give us a chance, let's do the work that we're doing. Give us the support that you've been giving us so that we can resolve this problem in Zimbabwe, assist the Zimbabweans to find each other. But they reneged on that, and so one had to manage that problem. It was a very, very, very difficult one because they were digging their heels on that one. They wouldn't budge. Then the second issue that we had to deal with was the question of removing Nelson Mandela and the ANC from the list of terrorist organizations. It's a process that I had found already being started by Ambassador Barbara Masigela, whom I followed there. It was quite a very tricky issue. They really honestly wanted to honor Mandela before they leave office, and that is Bush. But they had to deal with the question of the status of the ANC and Mandela. And they came to the correct conclusion that you can't deal with Mandela outside of the ANC. But then how do you make a determination as to who are the people together with him that could be the first package that you'll have to deal with? so that we can be able to remove him from that list.
Right, right.
With a bit of challenges, but I think we succeeded.
All
Then
right.
the problem.
You know what? We'll talk a little bit more about those challenges. I do want to bring in Ambassador Stith, who served quite a bit of time in Tanzania, especially during a very difficult time on the continent and in the world, actually. Ambassador, as the face of America on Tanzanian soil, how difficult can that job be sometimes when you have different people looking at the country in different ways?
Well, interestingly, I started my tenure as ambassador 1 month after our embassy was blown up by Al Qaeda. And I found the Tanzanian government extraordinarily cooperative and helpful. My dear friend, Benjamin Mkapa, who recently passed, understood the gravity of the moment, and it took me 48 hours to present my credentials when it could have taken 48 days. The other thing that was very interesting is that my tenure was coming toward an end in 2000 in the election between Gore and Bush. And of course, it was not quite the debacle that this is. But I remember one of the headlines in one of the Tanzanian papers was U.S. joins third world in vote mismanagement. I actually thought it was funny, being a non-career diplomat. A number of people in the State Department didn't see the humor. But the interesting thing that I found in the aftermath of that was that some of the most substantive conversations we had around the issue of democratization occurred then. And the Tanzanians' position, I thought, was very mature and very insightful. And that is that if a democracy like the United States, which was over 2 centuries old, could have challenges, that the Tanzanians needed to be even more vigilant relative to the maintenance of the democracy they had.
All right, so question for both of you. Donald Trump, the research says that America's image has been dented by his administration. Let me start with you, Ambassador Nhlapo. Do you share that view that President Trump hasn't served his country well in terms of image abroad?
Well, he reneged from very key issues of our time, the Paris Agreement, and the agreement around around the issue of Iran, where we thought that progress was being made in an attempt to manage some of these challenges. He pulled out of the Paris Agreement. He pulled out of the one on Iran, and then started pulling out of some of the UN bodies. For instance, problems with engagement with some of the UN agencies, the threat to the WHO, cutting the funding for WFP at a time when there were quite a number of challenges on the continent, and other provisions that the US had made available to ensure that there could be certain interventions, humanitarian activities that were taking place, particularly in conflict situations. So they really deprived the continent of those resources and the agencies and NGOs that they were supporting in terms of the funding that was being given by the U.S. And also the issue of the pressure that he started putting on some of the African countries because of the problems of between China and the U.S. We started having challenges with the implementation of AGOA. We knew that it was around the time when it was going to be renewed, but the engagements took quite a different turn because there was no real interest in assisting. And of course, some of the pronouncements that he had made about the African continent and Africans, which was also
unfortunate,
very problematic and disappointing.
All right.
And of course, we were with them in the Security Council and experienced quite a lot of difficulties because of the positions that we were taking, just about disengaging from everything and standing alone, isolating themselves from the cooperation and engagement and negotiations and managing the methods and workings of the United Nations Security Council. They continued, of course, with the issue of refusing to pay their dues to the United Nations as required, as assessed. And therefore, the relations with the U.S. became very problematic with a number of countries,
Right.
even on issues the UN, and of course, I wouldn't want to go to the other issues around the China Sea.
All right, we've got quite a lot to unpack. So let me give a chance to Ambassador Stith, because you travel quite a lot between the US and Africa, and so you would get a sense of what people are saying. We've been given quite a list by Ambassador Nhlapo there. Do you share the same sentiments that Donald Trump didn't help the image of America abroad?
Well, it depends upon where you are talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the approval rating for Trump and the U.S. is probably fairly high in North Korea and in Russia. But outside of that, we've had some tremendous problems. And I think that they've been most dramatically reflected in the current crisis in which the world finds itself in the wake of COVID-19. You know, ordinarily, with this sort of crisis, the United States would have stepped up, been the galvanizing force to forge an international consensus about the way forward. There were three novel coronaviruses. There have been three novel coronaviruses since 2000. Bush, there's George W. Bush, Obama, both had problems like this to deal with. And the first thing that they did was convene leadership internationally. Look, viruses have no respect of borders or boundaries. And so trying to take a nationalistic approach or a go-it-alone approach to dealing with a pandemic is ridiculous on its face. And the fact that Trump did not provide that leadership, as a matter of fact, he did the exact opposite. He tried to politicize the virus in order to isolate China. And the last thing you want to do in a situation like this is look for a competitive advantage or to attempt to confront other powers. What you want to do is to try to galvanize a consensus and encourage cooperation. So that we find ourselves where we are in a period where the world has locked down, countries are isolated, folks have taken a go-it-alone approach to trying to deal with COVID-19 is a direct reflection of the lack of leadership of Donald Trump. And that's the original sin. This issue around testing protocols and mask wearing and that sort of stuff are really, quite frankly, all secondary. If we had done a better job of convening the world to deal with this pandemic, I doubt if we would have experienced the lockdown. And as a result, we would not have seen the kind of meltdown in national economies like the U.S., like South Africa. And so hopefully, with a new administration, we'll see an about face. I know Biden certainly has the gravitas, the experience to begin to convene folks internationally to try to deal with this problem. If he does, and if they sequence the strategies correctly, hopefully we'll be living in a post-COVID-19 era sooner rather than later.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get an update from Sherwin Bryce-Beese in New York, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how America is dealing with the current situation, if that also is leaving image issues, and also perhaps what the new administration will need to do to start making friends once again with some people perhaps that have distanced themselves a little from America.